I don't usually do this, sit in front of a camera and just talk. My granddaughter set this up for me. She said, "Grandpa, just press the button and say what's on your mind." She showed me twice how to do it. I still wasn't sure I pressed the right thing, but here I am. My name is Walter Emmett Greer. I'm 83 years old, and I live alone now in the house my wife and I bought in 1974. Same house, same creaky step at the bottom of the staircase, same window in the kitchen that sticks in the summer. Dorothy used to curse at that window every July. I'd pretend not to hear her from the other room so she'd have to come get me to fix it. I just liked her walking through the door. She's been gone 11 years now. I'm not recording this because I think I have something wise to say. I want to be clear about that. I'm not one of those people who believes old age made them smart. I think it mostly just made me tired and a little more honest about the things I got wrong. And I got a lot wrong. There's one thing in particular that I keep coming back to, especially at night. Especially on the nights when the house is very quiet and I can hear the refrigerator running from the bedroom and the clock on the mantel ticking and nothing else. I think about my son James. James is 54 now. He lives about 2 hours away with his wife Karen and their 2 kids, my grandchildren Lily and Marcus. Good kids, polite kids. They call me on my birthday and at Christmas and sometimes in between if their parents remind them to. That's fine. That's how it goes. I understand. James and we were never what you'd call close. Not in the way I see some fathers and sons. Not easy with each other. There was always something between us that neither one of us could quite name or move past. Maybe that was my fault. Probably it was. I worked a lot when he was young. I worked the way men worked back then, or at least the way I told myself men worked. Like your worth was in what you brought home and not much else. Dorothy used to say, "Walter, he needs you here, not the money." And I'd say, "The money is how I'm here, Dot." I believed that. I really believed it. James was maybe 38, 39 when he called me one evening. This would have been about 15 years ago now. Dorothy was still alive then, just barely. She was sick by that point, and I was spending most of my time taking care of her, which I was glad to do. Glad isn't even the right word. I needed to do it. It was the only time in our marriage I felt like I was finally giving her something she couldn't give herself. James called and said he was in trouble. Not illegal trouble, not anything like that. Business trouble. He'd started a contracting company a few years before, built it up pretty well actually, and something had gone sideways. A big client hadn't paid. There were debts, payroll. He was trying to hold it together, and he said he needed money to keep it from collapsing. He asked me for $300,000. I want you to understand something about that number. That was most of what Dorothy and I had saved. 40 years of working, of not taking vacations we probably should have taken, of driving the same car until it had over 200,000 miles on it, of saying not yet to things. That money was in an account that we'd never really talked about spending. It was just there, like a wall we'd built around ourselves. James knew roughly what was in it. I'd told him once, years before, in a rare moment when I felt close to him. I don't know why I told him. I think I wanted him to know we'd be okay, that he didn't have to worry about us. I don't know if telling him was a mistake. I've thought about that too. I told him I needed a few days to think about it. He said, "Dad, I don't really have a few days." I said, "James, this is most of your mother's and my savings." He said, "I know. I wouldn't ask if there was another way." I believed him. I want to say that clearly. I believed him completely. James had never been a dishonest person. Careless sometimes, maybe. Stubborn, but not dishonest. And I could hear something in his voice that I hadn't heard since he was a little boy. Something cracked open, something scared. I talked to Dorothy that same night. She was in bed. She could still talk then, but it tired her out. I sat on the edge of the mattress and I told her what James had said, and she looked at me for a long time. She said, "Is it going to help him?" I said, "I think so." She said, "Then help him." That was Dorothy. She never held on to things the way I did. She understood that money was just a tool and that some things mattered more than tools. I loved her for that. I also think I was relieved she said it, because I'd already made up my mind and I didn't want to have made it up alone. I transferred the money within the week. $312,000 to be exact. Everything except about $40,000 I kept back, just enough to feel like there was still something there. A floor under my feet. James said thank you. He said he'd pay it back. He said it with so much certainty that I believed him. I'm not saying he lied. I don't think he lied. I think he meant it the way people mean things when they're desperate and someone has just saved them. You mean it completely. In that moment, you mean every word. The company survived. I know that because Karen mentioned it once, casually, at a Christmas dinner maybe 2 years later. Said something like, "Things have really turned around." She said it the way you say something that isn't quite for the person you're saying it to, like she was reminding James of something. James didn't look at me when she said it. I noticed that. I didn't say anything. I just noticed it the way you notice a small crack in a wall and decide you're not going to think about it until you have to. He never paid it back. Not a dollar. We never talked about it directly. Not once. That's the part that gets me. Even now. Even sitting here in this room, in this old house, in this life that is closer to its end than its beginning. That's the part I still can't quite settle. It's not the money. I want to make sure that's understood. I lived on what I kept. I have my pension, my Social Security. I've been okay. I don't say that to sound noble. I say it because the money is genuinely not what hurts. What hurts is the silence around it. We developed a kind of shared agreement, James and I, without ever discussing it, to never mention it, to act as though it hadn't happened. And at first I thought, well, maybe that's fine. Maybe that's the kindest way to handle it. Let it go. He's your son. You gave it freely. But here's what I didn't understand then, and only understand now. Silence isn't the same as peace. There was a summer, this was maybe 4 or 5 years after I gave him the money, when James came to visit with the kids. Karen stayed home, said she had something to do. It was just James and Lily and Marcus, and they were young then, maybe 8 and 10. I'd bought a little inflatable pool for the backyard. Nothing fancy. One of those round ones you find at the hardware store. I blew it up myself, which took longer than I expected, and I was dizzy for a few minutes after, which I didn't tell anyone. The kids played in that pool all afternoon. James sat on the back porch with me and we watched them and we talked about normal things, the garden, a movie he'd seen, something about the neighbor's dog. And it was nice. It was genuinely nice. I remember this clearly. I thought, this is enough. This is more than enough. And then something happened. Marcus got water in his eyes and started crying. And Lily, instead of teasing him the way kids do, she just put her hand on his shoulder, this small, quiet thing, like it was nothing, like it was just what you did. I looked over at James and I said, "She's a good kid." And James said, "She's better than me." He said it quietly, like he was talking to himself. I didn't know what to say, so I didn't say anything. And we sat there watching his children play in a plastic pool in my backyard, and the light was going golden the way it does in late afternoon in summer. And neither of us said another word for a long time. I don't know what he meant. I've never known exactly what he meant, but I've turned it over in my head more times than I can count. Dorothy used to say I was not a man who asked questions. She said it fondly, mostly, but sometimes she said it the other way. The way that means you've noticed something in someone and you've decided to love them anyway, and you want them to know you noticed. I didn't ask questions. That's true. I thought that listening was enough, being present, being quiet. But I've come to think that listening without asking is a little like sitting in a room with someone and never turning on the light. You're there, you're together, but you can't really see each other. There were so many questions I never asked James. What was it like when I missed your games? What did you feel when I came home late and you were already in bed? Did you ever need me in a way I didn't recognize? Did you ever tell me something important and watch me not understand it? I didn't ask. I thought not asking was a form of respect. I think I was wrong about that. A few years back, and this was before my hip surgery, so maybe 2018, 2019, James called me on a Sunday. Not a birthday, not a holiday, just a Sunday. He said, "I've been thinking about coming to see you, just me, maybe spend a couple of days." I said, "Of course, you know you're always welcome." He said, "Yeah, I know. I've been thinking about some things." I asked him what things. He said, "Just things. We can talk when I get there." He never came. Something happened with work. He called and rescheduled, and then he didn't call again about it, and I didn't push. I should have pushed. Or maybe called him and said, "Come anyway. Whatever the thing is you were going to say, you can say it." But I didn't. I let it go, because that was what I always did. I've wondered since then what he was going to tell me. I've wondered if it was about the money, if he was finally going to bring it up, say something, try to explain or apologize, or just put it out in the open air between us where it could breathe. I've wondered if it was something else entirely, something I can't even guess at because I never asked the right questions when it would have mattered. The wondering is its own kind of weight. I had a friend, man named Roy, who died 2 winters ago. We'd known each other since 1981, worked at the same company for 15 years. Roy had a daughter he hadn't spoken to in over a decade, a falling out over something that had started small and grown enormous in the silence, the way things do. And in the last year of his life, Roy talked about her almost constantly. He didn't talk about it like regret. Not exactly. He talked about it the way you talk about weather that's already passed, like you can describe it, name it, say what it was, but there's nothing to be done about it now. He'd just look at his coffee cup and say her name sometimes. Ruth. He'd just say it, like saying it was the only thing left he could give her. I sat with Roy a lot in that last year. He lived alone, too. I understood something sitting with him. I understood that the things we don't say have a very long life, sometimes longer than we do. I'm not dying, I want to say that. I'm 83. I had my hip done, I've got blood pressure I have to manage, I get tired faster than I used to, and the stairs are a project. But I'm not dying. I'm just old enough to see the end of the road from where I'm standing. And from here, things look different than they did from the middle of it. From the middle, I was so sure I was doing the right things, working hard, saving money, keeping my word, being reliable. I thought those were the whole job of being a man, a father, a husband. I thought if I did those things well enough, everything else would follow. But love doesn't follow from discipline. I didn't know that. Maybe some people know it young. I didn't. I gave James $300,000. I gave it without hesitation, without conditions. And I meant it as love. I meant it as the purest expression of what I had to offer. I'm not being sarcastic when I say that. It was love. It was. But I think he needed something I didn't know how to give. He needed me to call him on an ordinary Tuesday and ask what was on his mind. He needed me to sit with him after one of his school plays and say, "That was something, watching you up there." He needed me to ask once, just once, "What do you want your life to look like? What do you dream about?" He needed me to be curious about him. I don't know if I was ever really curious about him. I cared about him desperately, but I don't know if I was curious. There's a difference. I know that now. Last Christmas, James brought the family over. It was the first time they'd been here since before I had my hip done. Karen made something, brought it in a dish covered with foil. She's a good woman. I've always thought so. The kids were on their phones most of the time, the way kids are, but they sat at the table and they were polite, and Lily helped me clear the plates without being asked, which I don't know why that got to me, but it did. After dinner, James and I sat in the living room while Karen and Lily watched something in the other room, and Marcus fell asleep on the couch the way young people can, completely, like a switch flipped. James looked around the room, at the pictures on the walls, the ones of Dorothy, the one of him as a boy on a fishing trip we took. Must have been 1982. He's maybe 9 in that picture, holding a fish that's barely bigger than his hand, grinning like he'd caught something legendary. He looked at that picture for a while. He said, "I remember that trip." I said, "Me too." He said, "You taught me how to cast that day. I kept getting it caught in the weeds." I said, "You got it eventually." He said, "You were patient." I didn't know what to say to that. It surprised me. I didn't remember being patient. I remembered being tired from the drive and wanting a beer. But maybe from where he was standing, 8 years old, watching his father show him something without yelling, that felt like patience. We sat quietly after that, not the bad kind of quiet, just the kind that belongs to people who've known each other a long time. Before they left, James hugged me at the door. He held on a few seconds longer than usual, long enough that I noticed it, long enough that I thought, something is being said here that neither of us knows how to say. I held on too. I didn't let go first. There are things I would change if I could. Not the money. I'd give the money again. That's not the thing. I'd change the mornings I drove away from the house before James was awake. I'd stop the car and go back in and sit on the edge of his bed and just be there for 5 minutes. Not to say anything. Just to be something he could sense in the room when he opened his eyes. I'd change the way I handled his failures. He had some. A bad year in school. A relationship that hurt him badly when he was in his 20s. I responded to those things the way I'd been taught to respond, with practicality. Here's what you do next. Here's how you move forward. I didn't sit in it with him. I didn't let him feel that I understood how much it cost him. I'd change the questions I never asked. And I'd change something about the money, actually. Not whether I gave it, but how I gave it. I'd have sat down with him after Dorothy passed, after enough time had gone by, and I'd have said, "James, I gave you that money because I love you. I don't need it back. I need you to know that. But I want to talk about it because I think we're both carrying it and we don't have to." I never said that, and so we've both been carrying it. 11 years since your mother dies. 4 years since you gave your son everything. And the thing between you just sits there, in the quiet of the house, in the silences on the phone, in the Christmas dinner that was actually quite fine, and still somehow left you hollow when they drove away. I have a box in the closet, top shelf next to the spare blankets, that has letters I never sent. I wrote them over the years, not many, maybe 6 or 7, all of them to James. I'd write them late at night when something was on my mind and I couldn't sleep and the house was too quiet. And I'd write honestly, the way I could never quite talk honestly to his face. And then in the morning, I'd fold them up and put them in the box and never send them. I don't know why I didn't send them. Fear, maybe, of what he'd say back, or of what he wouldn't say. Of opening something we'd both quietly agreed to leave closed. One of those letters is about the money. One of them is about Dorothy. About how I think James grieved her differently than I did, and how I didn't know how to reach him in his grief. And how I sometimes wonder if we were both standing at the same graveside, feeling completely alone. One of them is just, "I'm proud of you. I should have said it more. I should have said it in the ordinary moments and not just the ones that called for it. They're still in the box." I think about giving them to him. I've thought about it more this past year than ever before. I have a friend, a woman I talked to at church, Miriam. She said to me once, "Walter, what are you waiting for?" I told her I wasn't sure it would help. She said, "Who told you it has to help to be worth doing?" I didn't have an answer for that. I still think about it. Here's what I know now, for whatever it's worth to know something at 83. Love is not something you can store and give in one large transfer. I believed on some level that it was. I believed that the 40 years of work, the savings account, the house maintained, the bills paid, I believed that was a kind of accumulated love that my son could draw from whenever he needed it, like a bank, which is perhaps why when he actually needed money, a bank is exactly what I became. But people don't experience love as a savings account. They experience it in the Tuesday phone call, in the question that doesn't have a practical purpose, in the willingness to sit in something uncomfortable without immediately trying to fix it, in the patience on the riverbank that an 8-year-old boy remembered 45 years later, even though his father barely remembered being there at all. I'm not saying this to be hard on myself. I'm too old to be hard on myself in a way that accomplishes anything. I'm saying it because it's true. And I spent most of my life not knowing it was true. I thought I was building something for him. I think I was sometimes just building. Dorothy understood this. I think that's what I miss most about her. Not just her presence, but the way she balanced me. She was the thing that gave all my building a direction. She knew which things mattered, and she'd tell me, sometimes gently and sometimes not. And I would pretend to push back and then come around to her way of seeing it, usually by morning. Without her, I've been a bit unmoored, even after 11 years. James has her eyes, exactly her eyes. Sometimes I notice it, and I have to look away for a second. I don't know if he knows how much of her is in him. I don't know if I've ever told him. There's a particular kind of loneliness in being old that I wasn't prepared for. Not the physical loneliness that I expected. I knew the house would be quieter. I knew there would be fewer people in it. I knew meals would be simpler and the phone would ring less. But the thing I didn't expect is the loneliness of your own history. The stories that live in you that no one can confirm anymore. The memory of a first apartment and what the street smelled like in spring. The arguments that seemed enormous at the time. The small, tender moments that no one else was present for and that now only exist because you remember them. Dorothy took half my history with her. James could have been a keeper of the other half, and maybe he is, in ways I don't know about. Maybe he still thinks about that fishing trip. Maybe he tells his kids about it. I hope so. I think I've been waiting for him to come to me, and I think he's been waiting for me to come to him. And we are both, at our respective ages, very practiced at waiting. If I could say one thing to him, and maybe I still will, maybe the letters will finally find their way out of that box before too long, it would be this. I gave you the money because I didn't know what else to give you. I gave you what I had. But what I had was the wrong shape for what you needed. And I'm sorry it took me this long to see that. And I'm not sorry I gave it. Those two things are both true, and they can both be true at the same time. And that is something I have only recently come to accept, that two things can be true at the same time, and neither one cancels out the other. I loved you badly sometimes, and I loved you completely always. I think that's the most honest thing I know how to say. The light is going. It does this early now, this time of year. That gray-blue kind of afternoon that just quietly becomes evening while you're not watching. I should probably figure out how to stop this thing recording. But before I do, if you've gotten this far, listening to an old man talk, thank you. That's all. Just thank you. I don't need you to do anything with this. I don't need you to learn something or take it somewhere. But if something I said is sitting with you, if there's a person in your life you've been waiting to say something to, well, the box on the shelf isn't going anywhere, but neither are you yet. That's something. That's something worth knowing while you still have time to do something about it.